The Thing is just a geek show, a gross-out movie in which teenagers can dare one another to watch the screen. There's nothing wrong with that. I like being scared. But it seems clear that Carpenter made his choice early on to concentrate on special effects and the technology and to allow the story and the people to become secondary, because this material has been done before, and better.
I would call this the barf bag movie of July.
This was a portion of a more polished, toned-down version of Roger Ebert's review of The Thing, and not the unfiltered televised one, where he waved his hands around like a crazy person. Released in 1982, this now horror classic was not one of John Carpenter's finest moments. Debuting 2 weeks after E.T. the Extraterrestrial, The Thing ranked 43rd on the domestic box office, below other designated flops like The Toy, Neighbors, and Blade Runner. Meanwhile, E.T. went on to be the #1 box office film of all time, pulling in over $359 million, where The Thing couldn't reach $20 million. I was there in 1982, in the cinema, watching The Thing. However, the world thought much, much differently. Looking for a feel-good, let's come together kumbaya moment, E.T. made people feel so warm and fuzzy that Spielberg's other classic, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, came in second, a distant second. Yes, humanity was back. But years later, how much are we still talking about this extraterrestrial? All what's left of the E.T. zeitgeist are Reese's Pieces and a video game on the Atari 2600. I still haven't seen E.T. to this day, so it's fair to say that many who did wouldn't care for The Thing. The same way I didn't care about a little green guy who wants to make a phone call long distance. While that explains the box office results, it doesn't explain why those who did see it despised it. I'm going to talk about the excuses given why The Thing was an artistic failure. Now, I'm not going to go so far and say Ebert didn't get it. He was clearly the voice of the age and his opinions represented consensus. While it is easy for me to look at this film from a modern prism, I'm going to try not to use "it was a different time" as an excuse, or brag about how we've elevated as a society since. Vincent Canby of the New York Times described the movie as foolish and depressing, and wrote The Thing qualifies only as instant junk. The first problem critics like Roger Ebert had with John Carpenter's vision for The Thing was character development. Here I am in agreement with Ebert, but for entirely different reasons. The Thing didn't have character expositions or a huddle around the table introductions. There are no flashbacks or spoon-fed in-your-face descriptions. We see all we need to see from their actions. MacReady is the pilot, Gary is the leader, Childs is the engineer who does things, Copper and Blair are the doctors, Fuchs is the assistant, Window mans the radio, Knowles is the cook, Clark handles the dogs, Bennings is the meteorologist, we think, and then there's Palmer and Norris. No one calls each other by their first names. Nobody talks about their past, family, or even careers. Only MacReady at times becomes the voice of the audience. What Carpenter did with his characters was put emotional distance between them in order to curate an environment without empathy, because without empathy there is paranoia and mistrust. This defines the legacy of Carpenter's film. Critics and viewers like Ebert thought characters like MacReady and Palmer didn't relate with them, thought they were one-dimensional, and disappointed the story wasn't more of a character study. The risk wasn't just putting distance between the characters, but distance between the characters and its audience. When this happens, the audience will have no empathy for them. In many films, it's considered a failure, and we end up with the first generation of moviegoers stepping out of their seats and just not caring. This is why when The Thing aired on network television, it had a corrected version with a voice-over narrator, giving long exposition throughout the film. Whatever mystery, theories, and wonder we had leaving the theater was summarily stomped out on TV for our own good. Personally, I thought Carpenter's cinematic direction was very effective. While critics could argue there was little in the characters to relate with, I would argue that was the point. We didn't trust anyone. The lack of empathy put us in the Antarctic base, not knowing what would happen next. It's a direction made at the disappointment of the naysayers. Sure, it took a couple decades to appreciate, but it was the right decision, because no one talks about the thing as seen on network television. The staff at Variety called the movie a letdown and described Kurt Russell as a nominal hero. The other issue critics had with the thing was the gross-out special effects. Some call gore, I call disturbing art. It was a gooey, crude, asymmetric mess, difficult for an audience to understand or comprehend. Because we fear most what we understand least. A movie can be too clever for its own good. The special effects turn many off for this very reason. For an audience more accustomed to a mask or makeup, it's an expectation older than Frankenstein, and remembered in recent films at the time, such as Halloween and Friday the 13th. Even the original Thing from 1951 had a Frankenstein-looking monster. This was too different and too ahead of its time. While it wasn't in my vocabulary yet, I remember the awkwardness in the theater when the cast stood around, looking at the work of art. Today I would use the word pretentious. It didn't sink to movie, but clearly others like Ebert didn't like it. Yes, Ebert is quoted how the film concentrated on special effects too much, without yet predicting how far a film could take special effects in their movie. And by 1982, pop culture had Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Close Encounters, and Star Trek. Meanwhile, the Thing doubled down with practical effects made from foam rubber and gelatin, when Hollywood was going into the direction of science fiction tropes of spaceships and CGI. Lots of CGI. But pop culture caught on, eventually, decades later, when the cash grab, not necessarily canon fantasy prequel The Thing 2011 was released, using horrible graphics replacing the practical effects once originally planned with. As a positive result, and a win for fans, The Thing 1982 and its special effects would become fully appreciated. But there is another theory why the special effects was quickly rejected by a generation of the time. Fred Topple of About.com never got into this. He writes, "The Thing was very slow with dated special effects. While I found the practical effects eye-catching and unique, I was never offended, put off, or insulted. But I was from a younger generation of audience members. So why were the older, more wise generation were so triggered? Why did the adults in the room show such sensitivity of foam rubber and gelatin? The history of film is not without its moments that challenged the accepted morals and ideals at the very time. They escaped our minders and gatekeepers, becoming timeless classics. The clue who or what exactly did The Thing escape as a gatekeeper lies in Ebert's critique when he wrote this material has been done before, and better, in the original The Thing. While there is much to appreciate in Howard Hawks' interpretation of John W. Campbell's novella Who Goes There, practical effects were not one of them. Hawks couldn't afford or didn't care to push the envelope and demanded The Thing model after Frankenstein, something that wouldn't frighten the audience too much, giving them something they've seen before. The infinity to the days of The Thing from Another World and its sheltered sensitivities of the time lay squarely on the Haze Code, also known as the Motion Picture Production Code. It was a set of censorship policies and guidelines that outlined what could and could not be said or shown. This wasn't exclusive to violence and gore. Relationships between men and women were strictly regulated, the prominence of Christianity unquestioned, and the American way, imaginary or not, remained unblemished. The good guys must always win. You'll never hear me praise the Haze Code. I think it was a blight on American cinema and on artistic individual expression. It was dictated by unelected officials who had little confidence in their own sensuality, religious and economic beliefs. If you watch The Thing from 1951, you'll see many topics relevant to the censorship committees: the fear of a communist adversary, the out-of-place romantic subplot, the infallibility of the press and the importance of the Constitution, but most curious, using cats as a slang for vulgarity.
Holy cat.
While there is such a thing as less is more, there are times where less is less, and we must break out of our shells we were put in. The Haze Code was so effective dumbing down art that a movie released 14 years after its abandonment still had to meet its expectations. Ebert was right when he wrote that millions wanted to see this, millions from my generation. We wanted a vision of Jan Campbell's work without the oversight of a commissar. For this, we thank John Carpenter. Will H. Haze was the chairman of the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America between 1922 and 1945, for whom the production code was named after. Many films and careers were destroyed because of Haze, including Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. Even the Three Stooges poked fun at Haze censorship in one of their shorts. Last on the list, as a reason to dislike The Thing, is something that is commonly found in many negative reviews, that is coming to the defense of the original. The newer version is backed with modern filmmaking techniques like close-ups, a bigger budget, not to mention Kurt Russell and that beard, but it likely stepped on many childhood memories. The Thing 1951 had that killer opening, haunting music, and the idea that something from another world could be threatening just a few short years after winning World War II and mastering the atomic bomb. But the defenders of the original go further. They came to the defense of Howard Hawks by name and his legacy. Howard Hawks was a legendary director and producer, including several John Wayne westerns, and was an uncredited writer for well-known films such as Scarface. His vision of The Thing is remarkably different than Carpenter's, going with a group adventure feel with several extra-wide planar staging, lining up characters as if they were performing on theater. He believed in long bouts of dialogue, like quoting military regulations throughout the film. His direction included strong women, exposition, lots of exposition, and teamwork. No coincidence that these three Hawks trademarks were nowhere with Carpenter's. It was so different that Christian Nyby, the credited director of the 1951 original, publicly denounced Carpenter's film with a backhanded remark describing the 1982 version as a terrific commercial for J&B Scotch. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that Howard Hawks was sort of a big deal in Hollywood. As far as I can tell, the only other movie remade of his was Scarface, which means you don't step over the man's work unless you're prepared to make a scene. Because I was a younger member of the audience, I didn't know, nor care, who Howard Hawks was. To be brutally honest, I didn't know who John Carpenter was either. Following who directed what and who produced what wasn't on my radar, but it was on plenty of others, especially movie folks who keep track of these things. Carpenter's version will be long remembered, because he did things Hawks couldn't or wouldn't be allowed to at the time. And if the 2011 failure tells us, maybe it's something not allowed today. Overshadowing Hawks was an outrageous accomplishment many didn't forgive, and the 31 years between films were too few. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think changed public opinion of John Carpenter's The Thing, from a box office mess to a cult classic? This is Mr. G of Synergy saying, you should play chess how you drink your scotch, responsibly. Check out other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching.